Jujutsu Kaisen's previous chapter treated us fans to perhaps one of its biggest confrontations yet, as Yuta Akutsu and Rika, the Queen of Curses, entered the fray to put Ryomen Sukuna locked in a three-way battle against those two and Yuji Itadori. And with the release of Chapter 250 of Gege Akutami's ongoing saga, we're getting what may very well be the culmination of everything that the author has been building up to ever since the release of Jujutsu Kaisen 0. So, is Yuta really the most powerful Jujutsu sorcerer in history? And what's this we're hearing about Sukuna's death? Well, stick around until the end of this video as we take you through what you can expect from Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 250. But before we begin, allow us to tell you that there are heavy spoilers ahead for JJK's latest installment. You've been warned, so let's dive into today's video. What you can expect from Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 250. The chapter opens right where we left off previously, as Yuta maintains a stance with one of the katanas he picked up from his domain expansion technique, all-encompassing unequivocal love. More importantly, we fans get an explanation about how this domain works. Whereas Satoru Goju's Infinity bombards his target with endless amounts of information, and Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine allows the King of Curses to use his cleave technique without physical contact, Yuta's very own domain is purely based on his innate copy ability, and it's one of the most intimidating domains we've seen in the series so far. First off, Yuta gets to choose to imbue the entire domain with any one of his copied techniques, which means that his opponent, in this case Sukuna, will automatically be on its receiving end once he's inside. This explains why the King of Curses had to continuously activate Hollow Wicker Basket the moment Yuta erected all-encompassing unequivocal love. But that's not where it ends. As you can see, Yuta's domain expansion also comes with an endless number of swords strewn around it. Each of these katanas contain all the other abilities that he's copied earlier. Each technique in every katana can only be used once, but there are literally an infinite number of them within the domain. Also, Yuta is the only one who can use these technique-wielding swords while inside all-encompassing unequivocal love. But just to make things a tad fair for his opponent, even Yuta doesn't know which technique each of the swords within the domain contains until he touches them. Yuta then begins the clash by summoning 3 Rika-shaped Shinigami using one of the swords containing the innate technique he copied earlier from Dhruv Lakdwala. Sukuna dodges these, changing the trajectory of the projectiles, but then Yuji's right behind the King of Curses, so the former vessel follows up with a couple of jabs. Sukuna blocks Yuji's punches with one of his available arms, which only gives him enough time to sense Rika diving for him from above. Rika circles behind Sukuna, and he juke steps his way to the side just as the special grade Cursed Spirit's fist lands, and this is where he notices that Yuta has applied an inviolable barrier to Rika's flight path, which explains why it felt like he hit a wall when he dodged the attack. The next he sees is Yuta in midair, pulling what looks like a thin filament from the sky. This is actually another one of the techniques he's copied from one of the Culling Games contestants, Takako's sky manipulation technique. Sukuna sees Yuta winding up and braces himself, all the while analyzing the situation. He reveals that he isn't fully recovered from his previous battle with Satoru Goju. At present, he can't use his domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine, and his reverse curse technique is still iffy at best. Sukuna admits that with his current energy levels, he and Yuta basically have the same amount of cursed energy coursing through their bodies. The King of Curses further reveals the fact that his constant use of Hollow Wicker Basket to avoid the domain's sure hit effect forbids him from using the same world-bisecting slash that he used on Gojo earlier. Basically, Sukuna's in a jam right now. And there's one thing that makes matters even more complicated for him: Yuji Itadori's cursed exercising punches, which targets the barrier that's keeping Megumi's soul trapped inside his own body while Sukuna controls it. Sukuna barely has time to react when he notices Rika hurling Yuji at him a la Wolverine and Colossus's fastball special, which distracts him enough that he fails to see Yuta about to take the offensive from the other side. Yuta and Yuji's attack land at the same time, but Sukuna blocks them again. The pink-haired protagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't let up though. He transitions into an armbar immediately, locking one of Sukuna's arms in the process. Sukuna, being the near-infallible sorcerer that he is, further analyzes that his overall cursed energy output drops whenever Yuji hits him with one of the boy's charged punches. This makes him realize that his enemies are basically chipping away at his cursed energy until he can't use Hollow Wicker Basket anymore. If that happens, Sukuna believes that the sure hit effect from the copied technique Yuta imbued his domain with, which he surmises is the Angel's Jacob's Ladder, will be able to destroy him. All the while, Sukuna slaps away Yuta's sword before grabbing Yuji's collar mid-armbar. He plans on taking down the weaker sorcerer first, but he's too late. He fails to notice that Yuta has picked up another sword, and this one contains Togi Inumaki's cursed speech. Yuta stops the King of Curses dead in his tracks just as he winds up to punch Yuji. Incapacitated, Yuta then grabs another sword and launches another technique he copied from Takako, Thin Icebreaker. The special grade Jujutsu Sorcerer sends Sukuna flying, but the barrage doesn't end there, as Rika follows up with a two-handed hammer fist that hurls the King of Curses further. Yuta and Yuji waste no time and rush towards Sukuna in the meantime. They're too late though, as Sukuna recovers from the hits he's taken and launches his dismantle technique at Yuta and Yuji. The force from Sukuna's technique throws them back amidst the barrage of slashes. However, Rika's right there to provide backup, and the Queen of Curses is nearly able to bite off Sukuna's hand if not for his impeccable hand-to-hand defense. Sukuna then takes a few moments he has to review the situation further. He tells himself that he needs to physically touch either of his enemies to leave a fatal wound using his cleave technique. It's easier said than done though, and the King of Curses admits that all the Jujutsu sorcerers he's faced recently have solid defenses. He also realizes that Yuta's domain has targeted him specifically, so he couldn't divert Yuta's attacks toward Yuji even if he wanted to. And for only the second time ever in the series, we see Sukuna acknowledge his opponent's skills when he asks Yuta and Yuji what they've been up to in the previous month. That window of time between his duel and Satoru Goju's formal challenge. Akutami-sensei plays around and shows us just how diametrically opposed Jujutsu Kaisen 0 and this current series protagonists are in terms of their personality. Yuji replies with the typical shonen hero answer, hard work and determination. But Yuta cuts him off when the genius sorcerer answers Sukuna by saying, "We cheated." The awkward response that Yuta and Yuji utter at each other, a simple "oh," provides us with a nice little digression from the action. Right after, Yuta makes his own analysis of the battle. He admits that the only reason they survived Sukuna's dismantle was all thanks to Gojo weakening him enough to stop him from using his techniques at full capacity. All this makes him more determined to take down Sukuna right here and now. With Yuta and Yuji having used their own reversed curse techniques to recover, they clash with Sukuna again. Yuta then notices a mark on the King of Curses' chest that has dried before charging his angle of attack and hitting Sukuna square in the face with a solid right hook. The King of Curses wonders if Yuta has clairvoyance, implying that the special grade Jujutsu sorcerer has copied Charles Bernard's innate curse technique, Ink, which allows the user to see into the future. Yuji then follows up with a two-handed open palm strike, while Rika smashes Sukuna with an overhead fist. Sukuna takes the few seconds to recover from the hits he took and lists all of Yuta's abilities that he's seen so far. He knows that he possesses Angel's Ladder, Thin Icebreaker, and Sky Manipulation, Cursed Speech, Clairvoyance, and the ability to create an inviolable barrier with Rika's path. That last one is notable because Sukuna speculates that Yuta can use Goji's Limitless. He brushes the thought off, however, and tells himself that Yuta would need the Six Eyes to control Gojo's signature technique. Meanwhile, Yuta prepares for what he hopes would be the nail in Sukuna's coffin. He surmises that he needs a technique that will catch the King of Curses off guard, a technique that hasn't been used on him yet. So Yuta rushes towards the enemy. He grabs one of the swords strewn around his domain and notes that it's the one he's been looking for the moment he touches it. The genius sorcerer then uses Sky Manipulation to hide the trajectory of his attack. Yuta pierces the thin veil made from the sky, but Sukuna catches the blade as it pokes through. With that, the King of Curses and one of Gojo's proteges are in a deadlock, and at that moment, Yuta utters one word that might actually put an end to all the bloodshed: cleave. Just as the chapter ends, we see gashes forming around his face and body, and all he can do at that moment is realize he's getting a taste of his own poison. Our thoughts about Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 250. With the 250th installment of JJK in the wraps, Akutami-sensei might have given us the resolution to the Sukuna problem that's plagued the world of Jujutsu sorcerers for thousands of years. But as always, Gege doesn't meet a beat when it comes to providing us with more questions about the series. First, when and how did Yuta copy Bernard's ink technique? Remember, that clairvoyant mangaka sorcerer only faced off against Kinji Hakari. So it's either there's a hidden layer to Yuta's copy ability, or, like Higuruma and Fumihiko, perhaps Bernard joined the Jujutsu Sorcerer's cause a month before the Shinjuku Showdown. That's probably where he showed Yuta his abilities, which allowed the special grade Jujutsu Sorcerer to copy it. That said, there are other techniques Yuta has copied from his compatriots. Maybe Meimei's Blackbird Manipulation, or, as Sukuna speculates, even the late Satoru's Limitless. Only time will tell. And speaking of the limitless, we have to say that Sukuna's analysis that Yuta couldn't use the technique without the six eyes is rather inaccurate. Without the six eyes, the limitless is still usable, albeit consuming massive amounts of its user's cursed energy. But since Yuta has at least twice the amount of cursed energy that Gojo had when he was alive, it's not so far-fetched to think that the second-year Jujutsu High students' reserves are enough to compensate for the lack of the six eyes. Of course, we cannot talk about Sukuna's as-yet undetermined fate. It's a total mind-blower to see one of his trademark techniques used against him, more so by Yuta, Jujutsu Kaisen's original protagonist. Now, there's a good chance that the King of Curses might survive this. He is, after all, the most powerful Jujutsu sorcerer in history. But it's more interesting to think about what would happen if he didn't. First of all, we get to see just how ruthless and cold-blooded Yuta can become when his friends are threatened. He has no hesitation using everything in his arsenal to take down the enemy, and that same contrast against Yuji's personality just makes him all the more appealing. Speaking of, Yuta used Cleave against Sukuna. If it does kill the King of Curses, it will surely kill his vessel, Megumi Fushiguro. Now, remember that Yuji is dead set against terminating one of his closest friends, which is why it's so interesting to think how he'd react if Sukuna dies along with Megumi because of Yuta's actions. Will Yuji understand why Yuta had to do it? What if the grief makes him break bad and we get a totally unprecedented duel between Yuta and Yuji after this one? We can only speculate for now. But what about you? What do you think will happen in the next chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen? Do you think Sukuna's really going to die from Yuta's attack? Let's talk about it in the comments section. And for more great manga and anime content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. See you in the next video.